Okay, hi traders. This is my evening video. I don't typically do these. I just do the morning videos. But and that's might double for my morning video. But what I'm seeing here in the markets is a total and complete capitulation into the close. And the reason I say that, look at your volume profile. You see how we have single prints right here at the very bottom value, right there at the close of doing trading business Friday. This is typically outright total capitulation into the close. So that's just something to keep in mind on your volume from a volume profile standpoint. Very easy, responsive short squeeze coming back into tomorrow's session, but it's hard to say for sure. Uh, Basically, this selling pressure, in my opinion, was the the firms and stuff. If the big firms had big orders to sell into the close, we would have saw a spike in volume at the lows of the session. We did not get that. In fact, the entire session was capitulation to the downside. But you know what? The developing volume point of control for, well, let me see here. Let me go on a 5 print minute here. Make sure I am saying the right thing here. See how price just completely fell out of bed going into the close? And, but that was the weekly. Weekly. I'm sorry. Let's go on my 15 minute. That'll give me a better look here. And so basically, you see how value, we just had capitulation into the close. Okay, and right now we're marking lower, of course. Typically, right after the session closes, that's what happens. But this was uh, quite possibly forced selling, where the fund managers and stuff, they had orders sitting on their books that had to be liquidated by the end of day, end of close, and that's what caused this stampede for the selling. This situation has to stop for there to be a bottom into the markets. So keep that in mind going forward here. I think this is a forced selling situation into the close where fund managers had sell orders on their books that hadn't been satisfied during the course of the day, and they had to finish closing out their books for the day. And they may or may not have been able to close out the orders pending to be sold. Because if you're talking about billions of dollars that clients want to liquidate, it takes a while to liquidate that kind of assets. So for any type of turn in this market, we don't want to be seeing end of day closes like this where fund managers are in a forced sales situation. We actually want to see the end of the day being stable and actually ticking up for a next day continuation in bear markets. That generally can mark a short term or permanent bottom for the selling pressure. So those are the things you look for in this situation going forward in your trading. Okay. Give me a second here. Let me find the other ones. Okay, in Q, really, Apple was driving all the pressure down here. We came right down into my next support area. And right there, the last minutes of the closing, that's when I started seeing above average call volume. They were all that sell off there. They weren't giving above average call volume on this sell off. It wasn't until we got to the very close. So I am actually thinking that they were coming in starting to buy up the calls, buyers and sellers were starting to meet right there at the close for a potential short squeeze into tomorrow's session. So just keep that in mind. That was one of the first alerts for Apple all day long, right the last few minutes of into the close of today's session. So that is a potential bullish scenario going forward because Apple is what's driving all the price action to the downside in the Qs, in my opinion, there into the close. And then just total and complete capitulation on our IWM. We're looking just below my next long-term support level, just enough to poke us down below on that. And look at all these single prints. Look at how extended. Look at it. Look at value. Developing value for tomorrow is way up here. This is absolutely total capitulation for tomorrow's session. That's a weekly web. I mean, well, I gotta go on a different time frame to have a better. Okay, but the weekly is total capitulation. Okay, and see on the daily here, it is a little bit more compact, so it's not quite as telling on that one. So Just keep that one in mind that we are really, really extended on our Russell. I just absolutely do not want to. They're just dumping it to the wind all week long. Very elongated volume profile going into the last day of the week. So that is something to really take note on. The fact that we have migrated so far, we're not even close to hitting the changing the volume point of control down here in these lower price points at this point. So a short squeeze back to the upside, that is very, very likely going into tomorrow's session. Okay, just some things I'm looking at here. When you have to start seeing major migrations from the weekly volume point of control, and there's not even a really close chance that we are going to establish the VPOC at lower. That is a significant scenario for a short squeeze, especially when you get way away from the standard deviations for the week. Okay, what I want to point out here, we are at a 6 standard deviation move on the SPY. Not a, two's extreme. On normal you buy on a 2 standard deviation or outside of a 2 standard deviation. We are at a 6 standard deviation move going into Friday. This is how extreme this move has been in this market. This is relatively unheard of for this level of sell-off in the markets at any given time in history. Okay, so one more day in the week and we have standard deviations like this. You're asking to get yourself in hot water trying to continue to push to the downside on breakdowns of that magnitude. Now the Qs, on the other hand, we came off an extremely high level on the weekly. I'm talking about, this is the weekly standpoint. We're at a 6 standard deviation on the weekly. It's even worse on the daily. But we are at a 3 standard deviation move on the Qs after coming off of an extremely high. So this is a responsive buy point. This is an extremely oversold situation, even on Qs at this level, after coming off an extremely oversold overbought situation. IWM, which is doing the worst, completely blowing out a 6 standard deviation. We are more like a 7 or 8. Well, we're way down here. We're like a 9 standard deviation move, on a relative basis. I don't have them all drawn in there, but I bet you that's what it is on a weekly a time frame, like a 9 standard deviation move here on the IWM. Everything here says to me that we are poised for a significant short squeeze. And I just don't know if the market makers, can have that going into tomorrow. But there is no way in hell that I would ever have taken an overnight session short going into last day of the week options expiration. Okay, situation we've got going on into tomorrow on these stocks. The implied volatilities are just jacked to high heaven. I mean, we haven't seen this kind of implied volatility since the 2007 crash. Okay, every single company on this list on implied volatilities, you would think they were having earnings on the very next trading day. That's how jacked these implied volatilities are going into the very last day of option expiration into tomorrow. You talk about risk beyond risk. And I know for a fact that I took Microsoft overnight, and I had a pretty good drop on Microsoft this morning. And whenever I finally this morning came in, I was really shocked just how little of a return I actually achieved. Intraday, I got literally almost half the move intraday in Microsoft for the same return versus carrying it overnight in today's drop. And it was all because of these implied volatilities and then also the gamma crush. But you see, the implied volatility is just coming off the unheard of here. Anybody even holding United Airlines into tomorrow, they're nuts. I mean, these implied volatilities, I mean, they're not earnings. I mean, you're asking to have your money just taken away from you if you own any of these stocks, these options that expire tomorrow. I mean, any of these options, I mean, they're just going to, I mean, the odds are so stacked against you to make any money on these trades going into tomorrow's session. Another thing is gamma. I did a I did a scan on the options with high gamma, and actually you can do it on stocks too. Excuse me. And American Airlines just some of these options on American Airlines are just unhinged. I'll do the stock scanner here real quick and sort. And you have to do it. You have to do it on the options. If you're doing gamma, you have to do it on the options. I'm sorry. It's been a while since I've done that scan, but basically, anybody even trying to trade American Airlines, typically you never want to have anything with significant gamma exposure going into the last trading day of the week. And here we are, the puts, 14 puts in American Airlines. You not only have the implied volatilities, you got the gamma exposure on top of it. So everything's going against you on some of these airline stocks with only one day to go in the week. The rate of returns on Apple there at the close, they were just completely and totally dumping it like there was no tomorrow on Apple into the close. Somebody somewhere was really unloading this beast like there was no tomorrow going into tomorrow's session. Like I said, I think they're bottom fishers coming into the options, and then Apple or American Airlines was active all day long on the options. I kept seeing alerts all day. It was one of the most active options for the day. But Apple, I made almost all my money on Apple calls today, and I made some really good returns. And that's what amazes me. Look at these returns on the put side, and I made some really good money trading Apple on just the calls today. It's just unreal what's going on in this market right now. Some of the things that were driving the markets today, absolutely total carnage in emerging markets. They were just completely and totally unloading everything they could in emerging markets for whatever reason. It doesn't seem to be like they're actually coming out of this coronavirus, in my opinion. China seems to be getting better and stuff, but they just absolutely did not want to have anything to do with anything emerging market related. And then also gold was just getting decimated today, and it had a lot to do with, I think, margin calls that the banks were having to get cash, and they were selling their gold to get cash to cut, and investors and stuff were selling their gold so they could cover their margin calls with this steep sell-off. Nobody could have ever dreamt this kind of standard deviation sell-off, and I mean, I really think it really looked like, with the exception of Apple, into the close, for the most part, it looked like a capitulation sell-off. And Apple's a beast, so whenever it sells off big time, you have to be a little concerned going into the next. But I'm saying, right there at the close, like I said, all that sell-off, I wasn't getting any alerts on Apple, not until the very end of close, suggesting to me that buyers were finally stepping in there, trying to capitalize on that big sell-off today. And that was something that really stood out to me, that the sellers are getting this wrong, in a big way going into tomorrow's session. And then my final scan here, which I'm going to show you real quick, and that is my 24-hour trading. I think I already showed you that. Okay. Yeah. Basically, man, the diamonds and Boeing was taking the diamonds, and Boeing and Apple were both taking the diamonds down big time. And then the gold was showing that as a major leader to the downside as well. So this is just some of the major movers and players in the markets today that I wanted to show you guys. And, some scenarios that I'm looking at tomorrow. We were in a, forced selling on steroids, and the gold sell-off suggests more than anything that it was a forced selling situation in today's selling. So they were having to cover margin calls and stuff. So tomorrow's scenario, we're going to either rebound and have a short squeeze. Okay, that's the first scenario. And in that case, the reason I suggest the rebound and the short squeeze is because all the implied volatilities are jacked to the moon. and a responsive, and we are so far beyond even the basic standard deviation logic. Even on the Qs, after coming so far up, all the way down to a 3 standard deviation sell off, that is a buy zone typically for the Qs where we closed today in the Qs. So I'm just that is on one major reason I think they've got this wrong, and they are going to try to support prices, especially in technology tomorrow. Because I don't think the sell off. I think that's actually a strong responsive buy zone for the tech tomorrow. So just keep that one in mind for that logic. We might just open and chop around, and in that case, they're just completely wanting to destroy the implied volatilities and the any gammas. They're just going to just completely destroy any option holders who have options for tomorrow's expiration, and then we might just continue to fall. And this one here might be the case for the Asian markets and the European markets to catch up with our end-of-day sell-off day. That would be a scenario for that case going forward into. But I'm telling you, we are going to have $1 trillion of liquidity. We announced today, and I'm actually thinking Asia will probably close green tonight. To be perfectly honest, that's kind of what I'm thinking. So just keep that in mind. We'll see how Asia closes. If Asia closes green, this scenario, the continue to fall, is probably going to be off the table considering where we are at in the standard deviations, especially on the Qs. I really think the Qs are primed for a responsive bid higher going forward here. So this is what a scenario that I want to talk about here. We just look at this elongated weekly profile. It was all single prints that last this end of day sell off on Apple. All this end of day sell off, all single prints for Apple. So this is a major red flag to me, bull flag, that the markets got this wrong, and it's coming right down into a Venom line support area, and we just barely crossed over this fib fan into the close. So yeah, I really think they got Apple wrong here on this sell off, and they are going to try to support prices coming into tomorrow's session. Ideally, because of this long uptrend right here, ideally the support area would probably be more like here, the 227.22 area. So I'm not for sure. I'm not actually for sure, but I have to be, the breakout started in this price range right here, the 226 area. So, we'll see what happens here. We'll see if that was just absolute outright capitulation selling or not. If it was not, then we're probably going to be coming down into this area here either tomorrow or the first of next week. It just seemed to me like it just got completely and totally overblown into the close. But it's anybody's guess for sure what's going to happen. But all those single prints, that's what is telling me that it was just panic, liquidation. Some algos fired, and then, like I said, so that's what's telling me going into tomorrow's. And if the implied volatilities hadn't been jacked to high heaven, I would probably be calling for a continuation move to the downside tomorrow. But the most pain that option owners can inflict tomorrow is a responsive move back to the upside. So just keep that in mind going along with your trading into tomorrow. Like the video if you like it, and please leave comments if you see anything that you don't agree with, or if if I can learn from you and stuff. And please continue watching my videos. I appreciate all the feedback and everything. Thanks a lot, and I might do a morning video if things are just completely falling apart in the morning. So thanks a lot. Oh, I go to cash every night. So yeah, I do these videos and I have these biases in my trading, but I reassess right before the morning. And generally I've been doing really well here lately, just going to cash every night. And because basically, the overnight, but these high implied volatilities and stuff, I mean, you just get crushed in the overnight session. You're just better off just to come in during the regular session and you know, you don't get crushed near as bad. At least that's from what I've noticed whenever I trade. Thanks a lot.